y'all, I'm Ellen. We've been super inspired by our journeys of self-healing and discovery.
And I'm Sam, and we want to share our experiences with you to help you get curious about yourself, reconnect, and get intentional about your life so you know what makes you happy.
Welcome to Woo New, the podcast.
We are so excited today to talk to Thompson, creator of EntheoZen, which is a nutrition company that specializes in mood health. So I think we can just get into it. This is super fascinating, and we would love to hear about how your supplements help people.
Yeah, thank you for having me. It's such an honor to be able to share, my passion projects and just let the world know what I've been up to. So yeah, I created EntheoZen about 6.5 years ago. And I think I'll just start by sharing a little bit of my personal story so that you can kind of understand, how the company evolved and came to be. I was in the middle of doing my undergraduate degree in neurobiology, and funny, it's actually kind of started with psychedelics, which we may or may not want to touch on later. But I was a young person exploring with different psychedelic substances, and then I kind of got into some harder classes with my organic chemistry and biochemistry and calculus and stuff like that. So there was a semester or two where I sort of buckled down with school a little extra and wasn't partying as much. And what ended up happening is I noticed that around the 7th to 8th week after my most recent LSD or psychedelic experience, I would start to sort of chemically unravel, and I would get increasingly agitated, depressed, inflamed, and just really off balance emotionally, when circumstantially there wasn't really any changes happening in my life or anything to prompt me feeling worse about things. And it took about 3 or 4 times of me experiencing this to realize that I had actually been sort of suffering with depression and anxiety my whole life, but then had been pretty effectively medicating it, or at least mitigating it, with regular psychedelic use. And once I figured that out, I was like, that's really fascinating. But is there a better, more sustainable, easier way to manage this seemingly, chemical and physiological based depression that I'm experiencing?
Wait, can I ask you a question really quick? Sorry to interrupt.
Yeah.
How did you figure that out?
Well, because there wasn't any circumstantial triggers to make me feel more depressed about my life. And the contrast was so clearly a physiological, at least influenced factor. Wow. And then I just started figuring it out, like I said, the 7th to 8th week, it was just like clockwork. And I'm like, that's funny, because the last time after I took LSD and then didn't take it for, 2 months after, I had the same experience. And like I said, it took 4 or so times of this happening consistently, right on the money, the same time frame. And then I just started paying attention more. And what this led me to do was become somewhat obsessed with understanding mood disorders, because I had never really identified as someone who, had chemical depression, though looking back, I obviously did. But it runs in my family, and then there's, definitely it's close to home. So I started just reading the scientific literature on mood disorders. And what I came to understand was that actually nutritional deficiencies were a fundamental driver of mood disorders and mental illnesses. And I thought, man, this seems so simple and obvious. And I started doing a lot of self-experimentation, and then just got deeper and deeper down the rabbit hole of scientific literature, and started to really explore the powerful impact of simple nutrients in dictating our brain health and influencing our emotional resilience and ability to move through the world without, just being crashed down by every little stressor, every little thing that goes wrong. So what I discovered was that so many nutrients are actually fundamental biochemical agents in a number of important processes in the body, like making neurotransmitters and rebuilding and repairing neurons and neural networks and stuff that's pretty fundamental for your brain functioning correctly. So this all inspired the birth of EntheoZen, because I was like, why don't doctors know about this? Why don't the people that are on the front lines of treating mental illness and all the people that are depressed and anxious, why don't they know this? It's so simple. And it's not woo. It's not really controversial when it comes to the scientific literature. It's only controversial when it comes to being implicated in actual conventional medical practice. So it was kind of astounding to me that there was this huge gap in what we knew to be scientifically true about human biochemistry and nutrients, and what we were actually practicing and how we were serving our fellow humans that needed help. So yeah, then EntheoZen came into the world.
Were you at the time just basically like almost using yourself as, almost kind of like a guinea pig?
Oh, yeah.
And creating different stacks and stuff of like different, because I'm curious, like, would you classify EntheoZen and as like a nootropic?
Yeah,
that's like something that I'm still trying to
Right.
I'm trying to like wrap my head around, but I'm curious like how you even were able to experiment and find that those perfect blends of these like mood boosting elements.
Yeah, I mean, the formulations that I arrived at were a mix of self-experimentation and really intuitively listening and kind of forming a relationship with each substance and really feeling the energy of it. And then, applying what I knew about scientific literature. So it was definitely a blend of theory and also deep intuitive listening to my body and also to other people's bodies, and really sort of gauging what other people's responses are, and forming this holistic sort of sense of these different ingredients and how they might balance each other and work with each other synergistically. As far as your question about nootropic, I've kind of intentionally steered away from labeling the products as nootropics. And the reason I have done that is because I would consider a nootropic a substance or a formula that has the goal of performance enhancement in mind, cognitive performance enhancement. Now, I'm all for that. It's great when your brain isn't like melting out of your ears and you don't have brain fog. And, it's great when you feel sharp and clear. But what I find with a lot of these nootropics, they really are kind of pushing the brain into overdrive, which I would consider to be reinforcing a chronic sympathetic or stress response in the nervous system. And I have questions about whether that's sustainable. Is it sustainable to push a bunch of dopamine and acetylcholine and such through the brain to get maximum performance and, to have it burning through energy so that you can have a super productive day at work? And then in the evening you crash and you're depleted because you're burnt. It's like you're burning through gasoline, like you're a Ferrari or something.
Yeah, it's like, what's the recovery of that? I'm so glad you brought that up today, actually, because I was reading this article this morning and it was talking about the benefits of certain herbs for migraines. and I was going through them and it had this like, okay, here's what people think are true, here's the myth, and here's the fact. And it was like counter to everything doctors would tell you. And then it also, there are no side effects with herbs typically, unless it's a situation where you're taking a nootropic and you're going into like overdrive. But,
Right.
Compared to taking a pharmaceutical drug, it's like, why is nobody integrating this into their practice on the Western medicine side? It's crazy.
Right. Yeah. Yeah. And definitely, with EntheoZen's products, we're trying to get people's nervous systems to calm down. That's the problem with most
Mm.
people. They're stressed, they're overwhelmed, they're overstimulated. And I don't really want to push them so that they can work harder and work more hours and be more productive. I feel like we're already working too much. I just want them to come back into balance, to have their brain activity be sustainable for them. And yeah, when it comes to the sustainability and the side effects of natural substances, they're generally speaking less. The side effects are usually less disruptive. Now, that doesn't mean that all natural substances are ideal or better than synthetic or pharmaceutical agents. There's definitely a place for both, and I think it's important to consider the individual substance. However, natural things like plants, like nutrients, we have co-evolved with them for millions of years. So our biochemical mechanisms have had a lot of time to develop very tightly regulated feedback mechanisms in the brain or in the body in general. So in general, natural substances, they kind of get metabolized and move through the body in a cleaner way, if that makes sense, because we didn't co-evolve
Mhm.
with necessarily these SSRIs or other pharmaceutical agents. So it's a bit jarring for our body because we haven't had lots and lots of time to sort out the nuances of how are we going to metabolically process this substance without detriment or disruption, because we've had a lot of practice doing that with herbs and plants and other things we've been consuming since we were ancestral hominids.
So if somebody looked at, sorry, Elle, somebody looked at like the ingredients list in your supplements, would they recognize the ingredients?
Yeah, most of them, I think. There's nothing too exotic or obscure. We intentionally chose ingredients that had substantial amounts of empirical scientific evidence supporting their role in mood and brain health. So, there's things like turmeric, which are, super popular, blueberry extract, 5-HTP, magnesium. And then there's some, more maybe for the niche herbalist like Mucuna pruriens, but there's passion flower, ashwagandha, lemon balm, all things that are actually quite well understood and well known as far as natural herbal supplements go. And we've just combined them in a way that is, in my opinion, a really balanced and subtle formula that empowers people's nervous systems to actually be resourced to self-regulate. It's not so much that I'm trying to make them feel good by giving them an herb that dumps a bunch of serotonin or something. I'm trying to give them a little bit of a lot of different things so that their body can actually decide what it needs and which directions the pathways need to get pushed. And because of that, our supplements are more highly tolerated than a lot of the competing supplements. We have one of the lowest return rates on Amazon, I think in part because we're not trying to simulate a drug experience. We're actually trying to go for a subtle and sustainable empowerment of allowing your body's own intelligence to bring you back to homeostatic balance.
I love that. I mean, it's something that I feel like just aligns with both Sam and I's, personal values. But I'm actually curious. I mean, because I think, not having tried the product myself, but I love the approach to it, and I love the fact that everything is like these are if you at all even look at teas and some herbal supplements, like the names of these herbs, like they're not so crazy or
Right.
unheard of, and that familiarity definitely brings a level of comfort. I am curious though, for somebody who is currently taking antidepressants and things like that, how do you imagine that your mood boosting supplement sits with like a pharmaceutical, and what is the relationship there?
Yeah, that's tricky territory because it's kind of taboo to, like, if you're not someone's primary doctor, to suggest that it would be safe for them to take a supplement, with it.
Mhm.
My unprofessional opinion is that it depends on which pharmaceutical they're on, because some are more sort of contraindicated than others. It depends on their doctor and their ability to sort of monitor things like serotonin levels, because I think the main sort of concern is that people can experience serotonin syndrome or serotonin toxicity, which, to be honest,
Mhm.
they most of the time experience from being on a multitude of serotonin boosting pharmaceutical drugs. And, different doctors might prescribe different drugs, or they might prescribe multiple drugs. So most cases of serotonin syndrome you actually see without, herbs as part of the equation. That being said, I personally think that the risk of, for example, our product Transcend, the risk of experiencing serotonin syndrome, I think, is quite low, because we actually don't have a very high dose of any ingredient in there. It's like a little bit of everything, like I said. So I have, some confidence that it wouldn't be a problem for most people, but that really depends on the dose of their antidepressant, which antidepressant, their unique neurochemistry, and just kind of where they're at with their serotonin levels, their diet, even if they're eating a lot of meat, if they're vegan, etc. We have had a lot of people that have used the product to help them wean off of antidepressants with great success. So
Wow.
we haven't had any
Wow.
reports of anyone experiencing serotonin syndrome. And I do always encourage people to really, you have to listen to your body. And I think you can usually sort of tell when you're moving towards a serotonin syndrome state, because it is on a spectrum.
Yeah,
And
what is serotonin syndrome?
yeah, so serotonin syndrome is literally when you have an excess of serotonin in the synapse. So oftentimes it's caused, you have these SSRIs that block the reuptake of serotonin.
Mhm.
So there's serotonin in the synaptic space in between neurons, and then it gets recycled back up into the cell that secreted it to be reused for later. But these SSRIs block that process, which ends up resulting in an increase of available serotonin in the synapse, which means it can bind multiple times, perhaps, to the receiving neuron and create this sort of sensation of increased levels of serotonin by increasing serotonin activity.
Is that
But
like being on Molly?
well, yeah, that's MDMA has a similar mechanism of action. And actually, if you're on an SSRI like Prozac, they compete for the same receptor site, so it'll stop you from having the MDMA serotonin dumping. So if you're on like an SSRI, you actually have to stop your SSRI in order for the drug to work.
Wow. I don't
Oh,
think people
wow.
know that. Wow.
Well, yeah, I mean, luckily it doesn't make it dangerous. There's not like a risk of serotonin syndrome if you're on like Prozac, for example. It just straight up won't work. It'll just be a buzzkill. So they have a similar mechanism. Yeah.
So if I have an excess of serotonin, I would just feel happy all the time.
No, that would mean you have a nice level of serotonin. If you have excess, it actually becomes neurotoxic. And the effects are quite acute. Like, this is something that, when you start to actually move into serotonin syndrome territory, you're going to experience discomfort. So there's symptoms such as nausea, shaking, hyperthermia, where people's body temperature gets elevated. People can have seizures or agitation or anxiety,
Wow.
vomiting, stuff like that. You can, severe cases, you can go into like coma and such. It's pretty treatable. It can be fatal. It can be fatal, but more often than not, once you get, adequate treatment, there's pretty low risk of having a fatal experience from serotonin syndrome. And there's a number of ways that you can treat it. You can give someone activated charcoal if the drugs are still in their gut to, halt
Flush
further absorption. You can keep the body temperature cooler because that's the primary, I think, driver of damage, is that the body temperature is getting elevated. You can administer serotonin antagonists, so the drugs that will block serotonin from binding. So that's the main concern when you are mixing antidepressants with either recreational drugs or supplements. 5-HTP, which is a serotonin precursor, can increase levels of serotonin, which when combined with certain antidepressants might create issues for people. And the interesting thing about serotonin syndrome is, like I said, it's on a spectrum, and really the symptoms of serotonin syndrome, they're actually consistent with the side effects of these serotonergic boosting drugs. So it kind of just comes down to like, what point is this considered a side effect of a drug? And at what point is this considered a dangerous thing that's happening? So it's a bit of a gray area. Does that make any sense?
It totally does.
Yeah.
Why doesn't that happen? I guess my question is, if somebody's doing MDMA and it has a similar effect on their brains, is that what happens when people overdose on MDMA?
Yeah, it can be. To be honest, a lot of the times when you see harm associated with MDMA, it usually actually has nothing to do with serotonin syndrome. Oftentimes it's hypernatremia, which is really just a stupid thing where you have not enough electrolytes and you drink too much water, and then your brain cells swell because they don't have enough salt to balance the concentrations of the cytosolic fluid. So that's usually what gets people into trouble, is like being dehydrated and electrolyte deficient. But you do see a risk of having serotonin syndrome with MDMA, mostly when people are mixing substances. They're either mixing potentially like pharmaceuticals and MDMA, or other recreational drugs, or in rare cases, things like 5-HTP and herbs like St. John's wort, which are also SSRI herbs. But it's pretty rare for you to see serotonin syndrome occur from one substance alone. Like when people are on one antidepressant or they're taking just MDMA, you have to kind of take a lot to get into the territory where that one thing is creating serotonin syndrome. Most often it's caused by mixing things that have different mechanisms of action for how they're increasing serotonin. For example, monoamine oxidase inhibitors, which is a class of antidepressants, we don't seem to really use them as much anymore, I think in part because they are somewhat dangerous with their drug interactions, but they actually block the degradation of neurotransmitters like serotonin. And then if you mix that with an SSRI that's also blocking the reuptake of serotonin, you can result in a dangerous flood of serotonin in the synapse and neurotoxicity. So it is something to watch out for with MDMA. Like I said, if you're on specifically like Lexapro or like Prozac, because they compete for the same receptor site, the Prozac will actually outcompete the MDMA and will just boot it out of the receptor site, and make it so that you basically don't have any experience. But then there's other pharmaceutical drugs that can be dangerous to mix, such as barbiturates, opiates, stuff like that. Alcohol is the worst. I call it the slutty drug because it interacts with so many different neurotransmitter systems, and it causes the most problems as far as drug interactions go.
Wow. I'm learning so much right now. I'm so happy that we're sharing this information because you have a wealth of knowledge that I feel like needs to be shouted from the rooftops. And it actually is perfect segue into our next question about your informational workshops and lectures on drug safety and how you can nutritionally combat the after effects of partying, which I find super fascinating. And like, man, I wish someone like you had been around when I was in school and I was recreationally partying. There were so many
Right.
times when I was like, I don't know what I did to my body last night, but it is not good.
Of course, right? You got to burn long, not bright. Um, right. So yeah, I haven't done as much of that recently, but I had a good stint where I was going to a lot of different festivals and I was presenting this workshop called The Neuroscience of Partying. And it was actually a huge hit. People loved it. People ate it up. They found it so fun and with actionable information, which was what my intention was, is to make something that was fun and educational that helps keep people safe and healthy. And there is more and more harm reduction efforts happening. And so in the workshop, I cover some basic things, just kind of teaching people, one, just how certain drugs work mechanistically. And obviously this was simplified, and I'm like, this works on the serotonin system, this works on the dopamine system, and just teaching them some like fundamental things to help them understand why drugs acted in certain ways and why they affected them in certain ways, and teaching them which drugs are toxic versus non-toxic, and then teaching them about dangerous drug interactions so that they know which drug interactions are actually dangerous versus what the DARE program told them not to do, because DARE tells you not to do every drug. So it's confusing for people because they're told that all drugs are bad. And then they, quickly start to discover that, I smoked this pot and like my life didn't get worse, or I had this mushroom experience and my life got better. And then they're confused about which drugs are actually bad for us because they've been lied to. So I tried to create a, sort of scientifically accurate and unbiased, just informational workshop where they could think critically about which drugs they want to use and why. And it's great to keep people from dying from drug interactions. That's really important, obviously. But I wanted to take it to the next level. And I'm like, well, what if not only did I keep people from having dangerous overdose or situations or drug interactions, what if I actually empowered them with the ability to be healthy and be vital and live a healthy lifestyle and have these ecstatic and expansive experiences? Like, do we necessarily have to choose between, kind of being hard on our bodies, but living a healthy lifestyle? So that's when I incorporated how to nutritionally combat the depletion that comes with these, all night parties and certain drugs. So, the obvious one is that, you're depleted of serotonin after using a substance like MDMA, which kind of just dumps out 80% of your supply. And so, just telling them about different nutrients and different precursors that would actually be the fundamental building blocks for helping your body make more quicker. So, 5-HTP I mentioned, or tryptophan also works. So tryptophan is the precursor to 5-HTP. There's this pathway where tryptophan gets converted into 5-hydroxytryptophan, which is 5-HTP, and then that gets converted into 5-hydroxytryptamine, which is a fancy word for serotonin. So basically 5-HTP is just this intermediate molecule, the middleman between tryptophan, which is an amino acid found in protein, to serotonin. So you can take, either one of those precursors, and they're like the raw materials you need to make serotonin. And then you have different nutrients such as vitamin B6 and magnesium and zinc, which are important chemical cofactors in the biochemical pathways of turning that tryptophan into serotonin. And that's what a lot of people didn't realize, is actually all these nutrients, they actually turn stuff into other stuff that you want. So it's like it's quite simple to understand. It's like you can't build a brick wall without bricks. You can't bake a set of cookies without, ingredients. You can't paint a picture without paint. So
It sounds like a lot of what you're talking about is actually found in Transzen. Is that right? Like the B
oh
complex
yeah.
and the
Mhm.
would you actually recommend that you take the supplement before you take a recreational drug, or would that be more almost to like as a like a almost like a hangover cure, like something that you would do
Both. And you could
afterwards?
even take it when you're not partying because the idea is that you're nourishing your nervous system so that it is more robust and more resilient and so that you stay happy no matter what. If the stress on your body is that you've been up for 2 days straight partying, or the stress is that you have to deal with your shitty boss, the idea is that you have resilience and you're resourced to deal with any insults to the nervous system. And originally, the
Mm.
first product that I launched the company with was actually a party recovery product. It was called Weekend Warrior, and for a while, I was trying to make that like our thing, like we were about harm reduction and helping people feel healthy and vibrant and present, and so that they could recover quicker and go back to living a beautiful balanced life after the weekend. And people loved it. They loved the idea of it. And there was like a very sweet grassroots sort of local community support. And unfortunately, I just found that the niche of like people that one were partying in this way, maybe not not a primarily alcohol based form of partying, if you catch my drift, but using other types of drugs. That's like a small section of people, and then the amount of people that would even care enough to think about taking a supplement to combat it, and then the amount of people that were able to plan ahead enough to purchase the stuff on Amazon or the website or whatever and make sure they had it before the festival. It was a very small niche, and the product never really caught on, to be honest. Like it wasn't quite successful enough to justify the continuation of it. So I did discontinue the
Mm.
product. However, that the product really was kind of like the 1.0 version of Transcend. So it did somewhat seed the evolution of now our best-selling product, where we kind of pivoted and decided that let's focus on mood, because like that's a bigger audience, and that was honestly always my passion, was to help support
Mhm.
people and them finding happiness by supporting their neurochemistry. So we just decided to make that our focus. But at the end of the day, I still take the Transcend when I party. Like a lot of my friends, they were like, "What are we gonna do when we don't have the Weekend Warrior?" I'm like, you guys, half the ingredients are the same as the old formula. I'm like, this is the better version of Weekend Warrior. It's just called something different. You can still use it when you're partying. It just has a different name now. So
Oh my God. I seriously, like, back in my raver days in the late 90s, I would have lived and died
I
by
know.
Transcend.
I'm like,
Like,
I can't believe
I
I
feel
didn't
like
know something like this existed. This is brilliant.
yeah, because I was that I mean, I literally would research all of my drugs and I would make sure that everything was safe. I was like that
yeah.
person, you know? So I would have absolutely stocked up before and after and all that. So I'm so happy that you actually exist and that you're creating this for, not just the party culture, but for all of us. And I mean, I even think that like with the influx of things like kin, euphorics, and there's just so much more emphasis now and attention being placed towards mood and having like alcohol alternatives and things
Yeah.
like that I think is becoming, I mean, thank God, like I feel like that's becoming almost passe now, and people are sort of waking up to psychedelics and some of these other experiences, not just to quote unquote get high and have a good time, but also to just awaken their consciousness, which I mean, I love seeing that sort of, that trend happening, and I feel like your product very much is in good company with all, like, this everything that's happening right now. Um,
Yeah, we're having an epidemic, a global mental health epidemic. And I
yeah.
mean, it's extra bad right now with the, the coronavirus situation. And obviously the US is, having some extreme cultural shifting. Hopefully that's what's happening. And yeah, it's like, the conventional medical model for mental health has failed so many people. And it's really obvious that we need to try some other things because what we have now isn't working for most people. And we need to come back to deeper wisdom of like, oh, if we nourish ourselves with adequate nutrition and food and love, connection, feeling safe
Mhm.
in the world,
Mhm.
having equality among people who, so that people can feed themselves and not have, most of the world impoverished. And yeah, I hope that we're moving towards a place where we're finding a more yin, soft, almost feminine approach to finding peace and joy. And it's not in this masculine forcefulness that we've been sort of occupying for the last, I don't know, God knows how long, but it's time to try something different.
Yeah, I couldn't
Yeah,
agree more.
100%.
And this is so you do also work in psychedelics and research on autoimmunity, correct?
Yeah.
So tell us about how this, EntheoZen connects with your research on psychedelics and vice versa, and how you sort of use them together, or do you?
Yeah. So to connect sort of the thread of autoimmunity and mood disorders and mental health, I didn't really talk much about it in the beginning, but my own personal journey, yeah, depression and anxiety and other mental health things were part of my symptomology. But the bigger issue that I was experiencing was I had a chronic illness. And there's a lot of words that I could use to describe it that would help people kind of, categorize it. There was Lyme disease and PTSD and food allergies and gut dysbiosis and chronic infections and, all sorts of, chronic fatigue, pain, skin issues, yada, yada, yada. But really it was like a complex chronic autoimmune condition. And from my research and also just from my sense of things, a lot of people's mental states are actually related to these autoimmune mechanisms happening. And they can be at different degrees of severity, but you do see this sort of immune dysfunction and chronic inflammation happening in mental illness. And it's very much related to things like autoimmunity and the immune system and the microbiome of your gut organisms and stuff like that.
Yeah, and
So
your nervous system, which is directly what
yeah.
you've been working on. Yeah.
Yeah, so the gut brain axis, which the gut is a key player in the development of autoimmunity and also just the immune function in general. So this all led me to being also obsessed with autoimmunity and the gut brain connection and the microbiome and how the immune system is so intimately connected with our nervous system. And kind of coming back to that original story that I told at the beginning of realizing that psychedelics were very effectively medicating this chronic autoimmune driven depression. And I became more and more fascinated with how psychedelics might be modulating these immune responses. And so I dug into the literature, and there is such an open field waiting for people to look there. And I've been able to collect a little bit of science here and there on the immunomodulating effects of psychedelic compounds, the anti-inflammatory evidence of psychedelic compounds, and largely a lot of the research and publications that I've been working on are still quite theoretical. Like right now, I'm mostly writing a lot about why there's good evidence that merits further investigation for looking at psychedelics as novel approach to autoimmune conditions. And, there's some very interesting effects, like, bacteria in your gut produce serotonin and other neurotransmitters. And there's very good evidence that they communicate with each other through these neurotransmitters. And they're definitely communicating with our nervous system in our guts. Like, we know that the neurotransmitters that they make directly influence our emotion, our cognition, our neurology. But we also, have an idea that they might be communicating with each other through these serotonin and other like metabolites that they create. Now, as you may know, things like psilocybin and DMT and even LSD, those all work by interacting with serotonin receptors. They're structurally very similar to serotonin. And I don't see any reason why a bacteria wouldn't be able to, if they're able to bind to serotonin, they probably have the capabilities of having psilocybin or LSD or DMT bind to them also, which has some really interesting questions about how could psychedelics affect gut bacteria? How could it influence the behavior or colonization of microbiome gut flora, which to me is like fascinating because there's so many implications of that in our health, in our inflammation, in our immune system, in our mental health. So that has become my latest obsession because it is so fascinating, the opportunities to discover things in that field right now it's so vast and it's untouched. So I'm hoping that by bringing light to some of the theoretical evidence around that being a very fruitful exploration, I'm hoping I can inspire some bigger players to move into the space and fund more studies. And of course I'm working towards that myself and being someone who could really pioneer more sophisticated studies, but you got to start somewhere. So right now I'm just kind of talking about it and sharing my ideas with my peers and other scientists and researchers and doctors so that we can all collectively start investigating that more.
It's so interesting that you talk about this because in my mind, as you were talking, I was like seeing that I think we've all kind of seen it. If you've done any sort of research on psychedelics, you've seen the brain scans where a brain on psilocybin, just it's like the neural pathways just light up, and there's so many more connections and things that are happening with the help of psilocybin, that taking that idea and putting it in your gut where there's so many neurons, like it's incredible.
So cool. I want to be you when I grow up. Like,
careful what you whisper. Yeah, and also the influence of trauma. Like one thing I've come to appreciate is really, to be honest, I think trauma is the seed of autoimmunity, and I see that from firsthand experiences of working with people with chronic illnesses and autoimmunity, and also just in the literature. It's like we know that chronic stress and traumatic experiences have tangible effects on the stress response and signaling the HPA axis, and that all connects to the vagal nerve, which is sending signals down to the gut, which influences the gut environment, which is going to dictate what organisms thrive there. And I mean, it's all just like this cascade downstream. And, psychedelics obviously have amazing potential for helping sort of unwind trauma that's somatically stored in the body. And that's one of the most powerful mechanisms I think that they have, especially when it relates to physical illnesses like autoimmune conditions. And that's something I talk a lot about too, is just how they can actually resolve maladaptive stress patterning as a result of perpetuated traumatic embodiment, really. So they're so multifaceted in the different ways that they could simultaneously address the psychospiritual and physiological manifestations and causes of autoimmune conditions.
Man, this makes me think so much about everything I've been learning recently around human DNA and all the discoveries that they're making around human evolution and how our DNA came to be the way it is now, and how, using breathwork techniques, you can actually lengthen the, what are they, terrapins,
Telomeres.
telomeres,
Yeah.
telomeres on your DNA to like
Mhm.
help boost your immune system and soothe your nervous system in the same way. It's like, I can't even imagine, once you start really getting into this, how much that can really like drastically help people. I mean, I'm just like, I can see the possibilities must be endless.
Yeah, as we move more into understanding epigenetics, it's becoming pretty obvious that our interaction with our environment is perpetually changing our genetic expression and kind of who we are. And there's all these studies looking at how trauma can affect epigenetics, and these chemicals, and there's so many things that we know can negatively affect our genetic transcription. But what we talk less about is the epigenetic changes that are positive from doing things like experiencing love or taking a psychedelic or eating, these foods, these highly nutritious foods, or even herbs. Like, we know that herbs and nutrients, they interact with our DNA and change transcription of things just as much as these, bad things for us. So I like this idea that even if there's things that can sort of negatively affect our gene transcription and expression, we also have the power to reverse those and change for the better with these modalities like breath work, like nutrition, like healthy social connections and community, exercise, all sorts of things.
From your point of view, just knowing where we're at right now, on sort of like, I don't even want to say on the heels of COVID. I feel
This
like
is
this is going to
just
continue
this
Just
to
is
gonna
like
knock
go
tip
on
on
of
for
the
a
wood.
while.
iceberg. I have to keep reminding myself, like, don't get excited. It's not over.
Right.
I know. I know. I'm like, yeah, it's going to keep on going. But, also with, just the uprising and just some of these amazing changes that are happening. I mean, I know I can only speak for myself and for the friends that I've talked to, but there is definitely an uptick in trauma through going through all of these things. And I'm curious, like, you have such rich knowledge in this. What would be your advice for us, just the average person who's living in this time and, knowing what you know? What would you go about doing to just even start feeling better?
Yeah, it's hard. And obviously that looks different for everyone. But I think the most important thing is like self care, self care, self care. More now than ever, we need to nurture ourselves because it's scary what's happening in the world. And, um, when your body is resourced, your mind has way more capacity to hold down the fort,
Yeah.
and so
Mhm.
obvious things like exercising every day and eating healthy, nutritious, organic foods, lots of vegetables, protein, healthy fats. And yeah, I think living in this day and age, some people are averse to the idea of using a lot of supplements, and they want to, get their nutrients from their food only. And I think we're at a point in history where our food is not able to provide enough anymore. One, our food supply has become depleted from soil that is no longer mineral rich. And, now we have these sort of modified
Mhm.
variations of food that are so far from their original forms, and they're not as nutritionally dense. And so I don't feel that we can actually get enough nutrients from our food anymore. I think we're now in a place where in order to thrive, you need supplementation, unfortunately. And also the amount of stress and sort of exposure to toxicity in our world, emotionally and physically, we require more resource to combat these increases of sort of toxic exposure to things. So what we needed, even 200 years ago, is different than what we need now to battle all these things that we're exposed to on a regular basis. So we're really entering an era where our nutritional needs are different. And so I think supplements are a great way to support the physiology of being balanced and being settled in your nervous system. Because when you're physiologically in a good place, it's amazing how something that would have otherwise really bothered you and tore you apart emotionally doesn't matter as much. It's quite fascinating how much our physiological state can dictate the story that we tell around the context of a situation or a stressor or of a relationship we have or whatnot. Our chemistry really can hijack our perception. I've seen it. I've eaten dairy and had bad reactions and then made up some story about how messed up it was that my roommate ate my bananas and then replaced them immediately. Like it was.
I actually, I heard about a study one time where they followed judges to see how they would handle a ruling based on their meals throughout the day. And like,
oh wow,
it was so insane. Like I think they followed a few judges, and they were saying that like in the morning after the judges had just eaten breakfast, or early afternoon for about an hour or two after they had just had lunch, because they were feeling better and they were nourished, they were like 60% more likely to grant bail. And then people who came at the end of the day were almost like 98% likely, like guaranteed not to make bail. Like, and it was all
meaning.
Yeah. And I was like, oh my God, our judicial system is so messed up.
Yeah.
Like this is crazy.
Right. Yeah. I think there's so many people that have no concept of how much their diet influences their entire like reality. I mean, people just have no idea. When you feel, shitty after eating something or good after eating something, you make up a story based on your environment and the context that justifies and synchronizes, the way that you feel and, what makes sense for why you feel that way. It's wild.
Wow. Yeah. I even heard one time that like, if you eat something and you feel guilty about when you eat it, that the way your body digests it is completely different than if you had just given yourself permission to eat it and enjoy it. Like your body knows like what that stress response is.
Yeah. 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 And circling back around to like, what can people do right now? I think physiologically resourcing themselves with wholesome, nourishing foods. I think also connection. And, it's tricky when you can't really see people or even touch people right now. But really making an effort to stay connected and to feel like you're part of a bigger community and that you're not alone. Like we're all going through this together and that you don't have to feel isolated and alone necessarily. It's like I'm human and I'm going through my own process with COVID and the state of the world. And, when I first arrived into Bali, which was not where I thought I was going to end up, I was pretty much all alone and didn't know anyone. And it was very scary. And the thing that's helped me the most is, yes, all the self-care and seeking, community and connection. But even deeper than that, it's really required me to take like a higher spiritual path in order to find any amount of peace with all of this, because there's been so much uncertainty and so much fear and just not sure what I should do and how serious this is and if I should flee and go somewhere else and if it's even safe to go there. And at the end of the day, I just had to come back to a deep spiritual trusting of that this is all going to be okay. And even accepting that if my human life is sacrificed, if I die of COVID, if something bad happens to me, if those that I love die of COVID, whatever, I had to really get to a place where I fully accepted the universal path of this is all a perfect rearrangement and balance of energy. And I had to accept that, I might be sacrificed as a part of this Gaian reform. So that might be a little on the
Mm.
extreme end, but it's like when people are really freaked out, sometimes they pray or whatever. And for me, I really just had to go deep into my connection with source or the universal spirit or what God or whatever you want to call it. Like, and I had to just reassure myself that what, all is perfect, and my life is actually a very, very small part of something bigger and beautiful, more beautiful, in the phenomena of existence in general. So maybe that doesn't work for some people, but I can just share personally that that's where I've been going to a lot, is really cultivating presence and being grateful for each day that I'm given, and knowing that I'm not entitled to the next day.
Absolutely.
Yeah, thank you so much for sharing that. We actually have been doing this, it's like a new moon offering, like every full moon and every new moon, and, we just had one for the lunar eclipse that happened, like, last week, and, it's a mixture of, like, Sam's a Reiki master and I'm a
Mm,
breathwork guide, and we have a friend who's an Akashic Records, reader, and the one resounding thing that came through the records when we opened it on behalf of the collective was, get used to the uncertainty, get comfortable in the uncertainty, whatever you have to do. It's, that is this huge collective lesson that I think all of us are being called to
yeah.
learn, is that, it's always going to be there. And the more you can surrender to it, and you articulated it perfectly, I think, just understanding your place, your small place in this world, and that everyone and every living being has its place in this world as well. And, there's a greater thing at work.
Yeah, and there's like a historical energy shift happening right now that I feel
Yeah.
like historians are going to look back
Yeah.
on someday and be like, remember when a third of the whole world became enlightened? Like,
Yeah.
Right, right.
Yeah, I mean, it's
Exactly.
virtually impossible to
So,
plan anything, and I just laugh at, like, how, it's forcing us to really develop presence, like, truly.
mhm,
I see so many people
mhm.
that are trying to leave Bali and fly back to their home countries, and their flights just keep getting canceled, and I just laugh because I feel like, the forces are just, they're like, "No, just stay put. Just just hang out
yeah.
in Bali for a bit," and I'm like, that's my idea of, the right choice is just don't go anywhere.
Yeah. And it could be
Oh,
Yeah,
worse,
yeah.
exactly.
like Bali sounds a pretty
I know,
good
I'm like,
place to
"You
hang
guys
out.
really wanna leave this place? Are you crazy?"
What is the biggest lesson that you've learned personally since starting EntheoZen?
Ooh, yeah. The biggest lesson, God, I have learned so many things. It sounds kind of cheesy, but I think, really following your passion and trusting your heart. And the process of becoming an entrepreneur, which I had no business experience, and I mean, I was a biologist that was like, I'm going to start a business even though I know nothing. Um, the thing that's helps keep me going through the trials and tribulations of being an entrepreneur, has been a deep sense that if my intentions are pure, that the universe will continue to help me get to where I'm going. And
Mm,
there's so many times where I'm like, felt close to giving up, and I'm like, this is never gonna make it. This is never gonna happen. This is never gonna be able to pay my bills. Um, and just trusting that because I wanted to help people, that the universe would sort of facilitate that and create opportunities for me. And I still believe that that is happening. And I'm also in a bit of a valley at the moment, with the state of the world and the effect on the economy, and then manufacturing issues with our probiotic, and not being able to pay myself when I had planned to, and yada yada. But yeah, I think just continuing to trust that the work that you're doing matters, and that it's worth to keep going and to keep climbing over obstacles, because the way that you'll fail for sure is when you give up. So if you never give up, I
Mm.
feel like you have a good chance of eventually eventually succeeding.
I love that.
Thank you
Yeah.
for that. That's awesome. I think I
Me
needed to
too.
hear
I was
that.
like, "Oh, I feel better now."
Yeah. It's funny, sometimes people will, we kind of get a lot of trolls. You're selling supplements to people that are, somewhat mentally not okay. And so you get some interesting characters, and some of the funniest things that they'll say things like, "Oh, this, they wouldn't give me a refund because of corporate blah blah blah." Even though we do offer to give people refunds all the time, but they have this idea that I'm this like greedy, selfish corporation or something. And at the end of the day, I'm like, man, I'm 6.5 years deep, and I'm still haven't paid myself back for the money I've put in. And I just think it's funny the people's perception of like businesses being these greedy empires that are like stealing their money. And I'm like, oh, I wish I could pay my rent with the money that like this business generates. It really is a labor of love. And I just invite people to consider that small businesses, they're really not trying to rip you off. They're just trying to survive a lot of the times. So support local small businesses if you can, because they need it.
Yeah,
Preach.
I'm sure
I
you get it.
know.
Yeah.
Yeah, that hits
I
home
mean,
too.
it's hard too because people are effectively conditioned now to just trying to find the lowest price they can, the best
Yeah.
deal they can get, the most immediate access to whatever it is that they want in that moment. And it's so counterintuitive to doing exactly everything that we've been talking about. So like finding a community, finding connection, being self-sustaining and understanding like what your body needs and how things interact and like what goes into all of these beautiful things that we have in our lives, and it just gets so reduced so quickly. So thank you for bringing that up. That's a very good point.
Yeah, totally.
Yeah. I feel like if anything, this like what we're going through with this cultural change and all of us are scrambling to learn and do better. I feel like that for me has been the thing to actually get me off of Amazon and into, like, all right, how do I
Yeah.
support Black businesses? Like, how do I
Yeah.
actually, find some more, mom and pop shops and, places like that I can actually buy from. Because COVID certainly was the exact opposite. It was just like, how can I get things
Yeah.
I
the quickest?
know.
It
I
was
saw
just like
this ad for
survival mode.
Amazon today, and it like the whole time I was watching it, I was like, this is such bullshit. And they were talking about like how many masks they've been giving their employees so that they can stay safe, and it's
Right.
like all these benefits, all these ways that they're giving back. And I was like, okay, if anyone watches Patriot Act, go see the Amazon episode, because that's not really how they're jamming.
I know. And
Yeah.
I'm an Amazon seller. We do a majority of our sales on Amazon, which is not my preference, but yeah, like just Amazon sucks, man. They have this guys that they're like, oh, we empower small sellers, and to some extent that might be true. I do have a lot of gratitude for the platform of Amazon that helps build some momentum as a business, but they're not out there they don't give a rat's ass about small businesses. They want to
Yeah.
use your data, see what products sell well, and then they're going to
Yes.
make their own version, and they're going to undercut you by 40%.
That's exactly what they do.
Exactly.
Right.
And so,
Right.
we've been trying as a strategy to really get people off Amazon. And it's so hard because we don't want to just gut, most of our cash flow coming from Amazon, because then our whole business would just collapse. But we just despise them, and we don't like participating in the unjustness of how the workers are treated and just the consumerism. And it's awful. But again, it's like this system that we're all kind of like stuck in and supporting, but we know it's wrong, but we don't really know how to relieve ourselves of it, because God, 2 day shipping and cheap prices are just so good. And like, how do we change
Yeah,
it? Like it's
exactly.
so intermingled and interlaced. And yeah, it's hard to dig your way out, I think.
Well, then actually, speaking of which, then where can people find you and purchase your supplements if they want some that is not Amazon?
Yeah, absolutely. So we have a website, and it's EntheoZen.com. I'm, EntheoZen. It's a funny word. I know it's made up. So you can go to our website, and we have two main products. We talked a lot about Transcend, which is basically the sort of natural alternative to, a medication, which is largely vitamins, minerals, amino acids, and plant extracts. And then we didn't so much touch on our probiotic, because we have a Zenbiotic, which it's a probiotic designed for brain and mood health. So, we talked a little bit about the microbiome and the importance of, the gut for brain health, but we have a probiotic that was developed specifically with species of probiotics that have been scientifically studied to do things like increase resilience to stress, or produce neurotransmitters like serotonin and dopamine, or to regulate the stress response and stuff like that. So we have pretty much those two products right now, and we'll expand eventually, but we figure we'll make sure we got two successful ones first. And actually, I didn't make a coupon specifically yet for this for the audience, but I will make one right after I'm done here. If you guys want to go on the site and try them out, type in the coupon code daughters. I'll make that the coupon code, and you guys can get 20% off. So if you want to give it a shot, and if the products don't work for you, you can always return them, no questions asked, for a full refund. So it's really a no risk to try it, and we also understand that there's no supplement that works for everybody. So if it doesn't work for you, no harm, no foul. And if you want to connect with me too, I have a YouTube channel where I produce a lot of content about mental health and wellness, and kind of share, a little bit of the stuff that we touched on today. Like I have a video about serotonin syndrome, and video on turmeric, and all sorts of videos that are catered to empowering people with actionable information, so that they can take their mental health and wellness into their own hands, because they know themselves better than any doctor or practitioner will know. So feel free to check out our YouTube video, if you type in EntheoZen, and feel free to reach out to me if you are inspired to connect, or if you have a question. I love hearing from people and connecting. So you can email me through EntheoZen, or through Facebook page, or the YouTube channel, or whatever.
So incredible. Thank you so much for taking the time to speak with us. I just feel like we just barely scratched the tip of the iceberg. There's so much more to talk about, but more for another day.
Yeah. Part two.
Yeah, thank you. Absolutely. No, this is awesome.
Oh, my
so
pleasure.
much.
Thank you for having me. I love talking about this stuff. It's so much fun. So thanks for the outlet.
I know. I'm totally geeking out. I know, me too. I'm like, you're my mascot.
Music for Woo New is composed by Adam Miller.